on the supply chain and specifically how we can upgrade the supply chain to meet demand. So please join me in welcoming our next lot of speakers to the stage.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this panel. I'm Naz Bax, founder and CEO of Team Bax. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today on upgrading supply chain to meet demand. Over the past few years, supply chain challenges have moved from being an operational concern to becoming a strategic issue for the entire digital infrastructure ecosystem. We're seeing critical equipment lead time stretch years into the future. Power availability is becoming one of the biggest constraints on development, and material shortages continue to create uncertainty. Also, let's talk about geopolitical events that are reshaping sourcing decisions and sustainability requirements, and they're adding new layers of complexity. So the question isn't anymore whether there are constraints. The question is how we continue to build, scale, and deliver digital infra in a world where constraints are just the norm. So we'll talk about the real bottlenecks. We'll talk about procurement models. But before we begin, I'd like each of you to give me a quick intro. So we'll start with you, Stephen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Zhao. I'm from Castrol, and I look after the thermal management business for Europe. And for Castrol, what that means is we provide a lot of the solutions for liquid cooling, basically from chiller to chip. And while we're fluid focused, we also provide a bunch of services and ancillary equipment. And with fluids being one part of the ecosystem that's touching everything, it's giving us a great perspective on what the industry needs and how we can succeed at building at scale. So welcome to the talk. I'm pleased to meet you all.
Thanks, Jude.
Yeah, thanks very much, Naz. Hi, folks. My name is Jude Clonan. I'm the commercial director with Apto Data Centers, a relatively newly established platform, 3 years old as of last week. I'm commercial director and lead the procurement function, and I'm really looking forward to this engaging panel discussion today.
Thank you. Karen.
Yeah, nice. Hi, everybody. Karen Petersburg. I'm with Powerhouse Data Centers. I'm the SVP of Design and Engineering. I oversee procurement, design, and sustainability for our portfolio across the U.S.
Thank you. And finally, Michael.
I'm Michael Gano. Welcome. I'm with Honeywell. I run our vertical globally for Honeywell, the various product sets that we sell.
So, Michael, I'm going to start with you. When people talk about supply chain challenges today, they're often referring to several different issues at once, right? Power, equipment, materials. From your perspective, what is actually slowing delivery today?
I think the power's a given, right? Everybody knows that. But I think what they don't realize, it's not just the equipment. It's permitting. It's actually getting the permits. I think the second thing is now you have the community reaction, right? Which people haven't really banked on. And that's getting louder, more vocal. We've seen it actually shift some sites for people. So I think that's a secondary one of the given, the supply chain. The third one that you'll see on bullets and you'll see on slides and people don't pay attention to, it's resources. If you think about it, most of our largest clients have said, Mike, what we built in the last 15, we're going to build in the next 3. Think about the resources that requires. And people say, oh, well, it's just gear. No, it's people. It's bodies. Equipment doesn't install itself. BMS doesn't test itself yet. We're working on that. But those things, require bodies. And you got to get to bodies now in locations where they have to go, where they can get power, which is not the normal stuff we all grew up with. So it's changing not only into products, into resources and people.
Excellent. Stephen, are you seeing the same pressures from your perspective?
Yeah, I think what Michael said about power being the #1 constraint is probably true. And then if you see what kind of equipment has the longest lead time, here's power generation equipment, and then it kind of follows on from that. But I think the problem sometimes even goes a bit deeper, right? Because what we're seeing now is increasing demand, and what we need demanded is changing very rapidly. So it's not just like certain equipment. Actually, power might be a bit of an easier solution here because all the equipment is kind of, you need to gas power generators. They're kind of set in stone. When you start getting outside of the building into the white space, that's where you start to get equipment that is dependent on the technology cycle, right? And here we're talking now about technology cycle of AI chips, and that's a 1-year cycle. So you need to have equipment that is matching that pace of technology development. So it means that on a timeline perspective, the products that you need haven't really even come out yet. They haven't been designed. So that's a different challenge altogether.
So it's predicting the future, basically.
Yeah.
In real time. Yep. Jude, what's having the biggest impact for you on project delivery?
I think Michael and Stephen both touched on it. Power, permitting, and people, the 3 Ps. But what we are experiencing is lead times, and they're ever increasing. So what the biggest challenge we're finding is trying to adjust or have the word standardization. A lot of people don't like it, but trying to standardize designs that opens up the supply chain, which will have more off-the-shelf products, which ultimately will reduce lead times. So where we're experiencing bottlenecks is where you have bespoke designs and you're limiting that supply chain pool. And that's the biggest challenge we see at the moment.
I like that. So standardization, so it'll help you sort of start to see into the future, if you like. Karen, where do you see the biggest constraints? Is it the 3 Ps? Is it community?
It's the 3 Ps for sure. Yeah, I don't have too much to add there. Nailed it.
Well, that's easy for me then, because it's you guys have sort of nailed it. I don't think we need to do any more here. But it's not a single bottleneck, right? Everything's interconnected. And that leads us into how organizations are changing how they work with suppliers. I saw some faces there. So, Stephen, I'm going to come to you. Traditional procurement models were designed for a world where everything was available relatively predictably, right? Are those models still fit for purpose today?
I think there's a bit of a flexibility that needs to be introduced in procurement models, because if we're looking at long lead time items, you need to give the supplier a heads up on your build plans. There needs to be more effort put into forecasting demand, just so that there's a bit of a anchor in terms of being able to accelerate the production capacity. And similarly, when we mentioned about product innovation and having to follow this 1-year technology cycle, sometimes you need to already be mapping out demand for the product development phase. And on the other side, being a supplier, it's also very important to recognize that speed to market is the #1 concern for customers. And to meet that demand, I think we also need to challenge some of our preconceptions, right? I think for the past 15, 20 years or so, there's been a lot of push to minimize working capital, so nobody likes to hold any stock of anything. Yeah. Is that really the right thing to do in this kind of environment where we're seeing a lot of supply disruption and a lot of geopolitical risk, for instance, that's happening, disrupting supply chains? So I think as suppliers, we need to be more flexible in terms of having stocks in different regions, having different regional capacity for manufacturing and so on, so that you have that flexibility to meet customer demand and to handle crises when they come in.
We all love a good crisis, though, don't we? So, Karen, are investors and developers thinking differently about procurement and risk today?
I think they're merging. I think for a while, yes, they were on different planes because investors want to get their capital back as quickly as possible. And as you know, if you have to put out large amounts of money to secure your supply chain early on, that becomes a bit of a problem. And so now we're seeing, started with power, right? Power is the biggest issue, and how everything's changing with the utilities and what the requirements are on developers to prove that they have a tenant that's actually there, and what does that mean to secure the power from a cost perspective. So once that started to shift, the investment backing partners saw that and realized that, oh no, I do have to start putting money out sooner to solve for that, or else we won't get the power, which means we won't get the tenant, we won't get the lease, right? So that has caused them to shift that we've seen, and so now they're getting closer. But in terms of what we need to do with overall capacity for the supply chain, the actual equipment and things like that, I think it depends on which type of investment partner you use, and so you got to be selective and understand where their risk profile is and what they're actually interested in doing before you select them as a partner, depending on what your needs are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're maybe looking at more co-development, risk sharing, kind of how we look ahead. So, Jude, what does successful supplier collaboration look like from your perspective?
Yeah, that's probably you get kicked off. The first question was how traditional approaches are changing. And the days of issuing a competitive RFP out to general contractors or equipment suppliers and expecting full engagement and an immediate response, like that's changed. So
Really?
So what we are seeing at Apto is, like, we're looking at sites and we're 3 years out from breaking ground and we're engaging with general contractors, substation contractors, equipment manufacturers and consultants. You do
So
need...
as soon as the deal is inked, you're already sort of reaching out.
As soon as you're looking at a site, you're acquiring land, like straight away, you're getting feedback from the local supply chain. We are finding that we're having a lot of success with pre-construction services agreements, whereby, let's call a spade, everyone is a specialist or an expert in different fields. So what we're trying to do is bring them all together, understand your precast supply chain locally, what's their prevailing building form. This informs your design, so you're completely minimizing that risk for down the line.
I'd like to just jump on that too.
Yeah.
'Cause I totally agree with what you're saying, and it does change the traditional model, right? Before it was the developer worked with the architect, worked with the engineer, and then worked with the GC, and it was like this hierarchical design phase, then construction went down. But now with the supply constraints that we have, everything's getting pulled to the left. And so when you do these large gigawatt campuses, like we have a 1.8 gigawatt campus that we're working on now, in order to do it successfully, you need everybody at the table day one to plan with you, to help you execute on that goal, because they all need to be working in concert. As the tenant comes in, they need to know and to help inform what can be shifted, when can it be shifted. And so it's really critical to have good partners and have them at your table day one in a partnership arrangement where there's nobody who's better than anybody else. It's all collaborative. You've got to leave the ego at the door. Everybody's voice matters.
I love that. I absolutely love that. If only it was true for everyone, though, right?
You got to start somewhere.
We won't name names. Michael, then, how are customer expectations changing?
I think Karen captured it a lot. It's changed, right? I grew up in sales. So traditionally, there was always this battle between customers, vendors. Are you a vendor? Are you a supplier? Are you a partner, right? What are you? And everybody had this different. I think now truly it requires a partnership because no one person does it all. It's just, I don't care who you are, right? We got the big names here. They don't do it all. And neither do we. We're a big name. Nobody does it all. So you have to collaborate. Two, I think the conversations are shifting from products to capacity. I'm having more conversations with large end users around where's your capacity? What can you do? If you can't go here, can you go there? How can you help me go here if you don't have bodies there, right? People there. Yeah. And so I think it is changing, as she says. And it's actually it's very different for all of us that have been traditional sellers growing up in this space, because you now got to collaborate with people you never thought you would, but you have to.
Yeah.
That's the only way it's going to work.
So bringing everyone to the table. We unfortunately lost 5 minutes on this panel, so I would have loved to delve into sort of what you were talking about, bringing people together and maybe how that community aspect comes in, but we can talk about that offline or if we have time, which I don't think we will. So let's talk about going from procurement to delivery. Jude, let's start with you. Let's talk about scaling under constraint, right? So demand continues to accelerate despite these challenges we've talked about. So how are organizations adapting, and what practical changes are enabling projects to move forward? Is it what you've talked about, like bringing everyone to the table? What else? How's your organization adapting, and how are others adapting to this constraints that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think the four main owner-operators and then the developers, I think they have very similar procurement approaches. There's four key procurement categories in the data center ecosystem: substations, GCs, equipment, and consultants. And I think everyone is doing very similar. A lot of people are OFCI, buying the equipment, free issuing. You see some people thinking outside the box with procuring substation equipment directly. So I think as we progress on these challenges, we're going to experience more challenges as we continue down the road. We're going to see this, the winners are going to be those that think outside the box. supply chain engagement, partnering, bringing them in on a stage 2 of a design stage rather than at the end. That's one. We also have seen some master purchasing agreements and having frameworks in place, categorization of suppliers. So you have an A, B, and a C, so everyone knows they're going to get some element of work. So the supply chain, they're not wasting their time, they're not spending time and effort. Michael, you've probably seen it throughout the years, but I think once the supply chain understand that they're going to be a partner and they will be engaged on the project, we're seeing that work very beneficial for us.
And I think it's really important to note that, right? Because it's a supplier's world now. You guys have the right to say no. So if somebody's working with you who's not nice or doesn't work well with you, don't work with them, right? This is your time to stand up for yourselves.
I love it. I love it. And you talked about earlier, Jude, standardization, and I think that there is greater standardization happening across this.
Yeah, it's probably the design people in the room will probably laugh the head when I say standardization because it does limit that flexibility. But the challenge we have is that technology is evolving. Every 6 months, designs are evolving.
Yeah.
And then trying to build standardization into a design that you're trying to forecast for the future, the only real way to do that is add money and add time to projects. And ultimately then end users and customers not willing to pay. So it's trying to find that sweet spot. If you can implement standardization in design, but have an element of flexibility in that to allow for change, which is inevitable in this industry.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's the huge challenge we're seeing.
Let's just call it the new S word, and we'll leave it there. Stephen, what are the most effective approaches you've seen? Is it what we've talked about already?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we've already been covered. I think a lot of it to do with the build time sales of data centers. This is a good touch point. I think maybe some of the other things that we can probably do more on supplier side is also to try and be more proactive. And I think this is communication is really key here. Because sometimes you can do this kind of front-end process of gathering everybody, taking this community approach, and we all kind of agree, have a vague idea of what's going on. Then it's all silent. And being, we do fluids, we do a lot of the commissioning side of things, so last step of the process. Oftentimes there's a lot of like quiet and, you're chasing people for timelines and so on, and then all of a sudden it's like, we need everything in 2 weeks. Which,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this kind of problem then, and everything that's required in those 2 weeks is not all just from one company, right? It's on the general contractor side, they're pulling in a lot of different people who need 2 weeks. So if one person falls out, one company falls short, that delays the next one and the next one, and suddenly instead of 2 weeks, you're looking at 2 months.
Yeah.
And that's hampering the speed to market. So having better communication along the way, so people see it coming, I think that can be, one of those powerful levers to make things better.
I really liked what you said about being proactive, because what we're seeing, at least what we're seeing in the industry, is as the GCs are getting slammed, we talked about people, right? The problem with people. So there's a lot of new people that don't have as much experience running projects, and they're not doing it in the traditional ways that we've been used to with submittal logs and RFI logs. It's like 100 submittals go to an AE and say, hey, I need them all in 2 weeks, and everyone's like, wait, what a second? It just doesn't work like that. There has to be a priority list. And so to your point in terms of communication, you have to be able to train, manage up, and help them be successful by vocalizing what your needs are and where you stand in the picture to make sure that they know they need to communicate with you.
Yeah, and probably to add the communication piece, the continuous communication is something that we firmly believe in. So what we found is that you have a project and you're working with supply chain, and that communication stops once the project kicks. But it's really important to maintain communication with vendors. And what's changed over the past number of years is being open and be willing to share your future plans. Up to 3-4 years ago, people wouldn't, very reluctant what they would share with the supply chain, be it equipment vendors, GCs, consultants. But now I think the people that are going to be successful are the organizations that are being open, transparent, and giving vendors and supply chain partners that long-term view, and that allows them to plan and build for the future.
And I keep jumping in
great.
on people, but I love what everyone's saying as I get excited. But yeah, we also do that too. We bring it down a level, right? ECs, MCs, your major trade partners, making sure that they have a seat at the table when it comes to what we're doing. But you can't do it without them. And it is hard to get good GCs and good mechanical and electrical subcontractors anymore because there's so much demand and so much opportunity out there. So you have to be a really good person, you have to be transparent, you have to make sure everybody knows what's going on, and you have to be in the relationship 100% and know that it's not just about you, it's about them too and what their needs are and being receptive and open to that. And I think that's shifting, that mindset is shifting, it's happening now, and it's really exciting to see that partnership change.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's exciting to move from just the traditional vendor relationship to a partner, but as vendors, we have to learn to be transparent, right? We all know we have all worked for lots of vendors. Don't tell the customer. No. This didn't happen. Oh my gosh, hide it. You can't do that in today's world. No. One, the group of people you're dealing with are probably, I might be biased, some of the most intelligent people on the planet building data centers. They know costs. They know suppliers. They know all these things. So you got to work with them, right? I have to laugh at what Steve had said. When I first came here many years ago, I watched the supply chain effect of I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. And the last guy says I'm going to be on time. And in my head, I'm like, some kind of math I don't understand. But so I think we've learned you got to collaborate, you got to work together to get there.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to say the same thing. We've all sat there and gone, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that. And I think if we're opening up that world, I think it makes it just easier for everyone, right? Yeah. That's the world we're in.
And you have to know that the owners got your back.
Yeah.
We're not going to play the blame game because we understand their challenges. And we want to be your partner. We want to help remove those challenges from you to be true, to help the whole project be successful, right?
So I'm going to move on to our next topic, which is sustainability goals, which on our prep call led to a very excited discussion. So I'm excited for this part. So Karen, I'm going to come to you first on this one. I wonder why. So sustainability commitments remain high on the agenda. How realistic are alternative materials and sustainable approaches today?
I think they're still very valid and relevant. In fact, I think more so because we have to think outside the box. We have to be doing something new and novel in order to meet what we are going to be doing in the future, which is net zero buildings, right? We're going to be actually negative. I know people freak out about that, but there's new technology coming out that's actually proving to make that possible. And it's really exciting to see and be a part of. So I think it's going to only go in the positive direction. And to go back to the community sentiment issue, the data center industry is inherently sustainable. We care about energy efficiency for a lot of reasons, right? Number one, probably because it increases our profit when we can have a lower PUE, right? So we are motivated to be sustainable, but not just for that reason, because we all have kids, and those who don't have kids want to live on this planet for a long time. And so there's a lot of motivation and excitement behind how can we as an industry do the right thing, given what the community concerns are, because we don't want to be that guy, right? We don't want to be that bad person. We care about what we do, and we love our industry, or we wouldn't be here,
Absolutely. So on that topic, which innovations are genuinely ready for adoption at scale? Or Michael, do you have a thought on?
Well, I think we will get there. Those technologies are more expensive. And I don't know about all of you, but we want to buy on all this stuff. And then when our cost goes up on something, we complain as consumers on the planet, right? We say, oh, geez, the cost of this went up. So I think Karen's right. We will get there. I think the costs have to come down. But I think technologies like BESS, right, battery energy storage, all this, I won't call it newer stuff, but I guess it's newer compared to the rest. It's working, but traditional technology, it's going to take time, and people are going to have to adapt and want to do it. But the pressure from the communities, I think, and like my kids, my daughter boycotted me last week. She said, I'm boycotting you and AI. And I said, why? She said, because you're going to destroy the planet. And I said, well, thank you for sending a text, because you just went to the 11,000 data centers on the planet.
Yeah, it's my favorite when people complain about data centers on.
But they're texting you about.
Yeah, exactly, on public forums. So Jude, what are you seeing on projects today in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, I think to build on, it's fundamentally important, and I think the industry as a whole values that. And we're all working in the right direction. What I see working best is probably modularization. It's been around for years, but over the past 2 to 3 years, there's been a huge focus and a huge improvement on modularized switch rooms. They're fundamentally reducing the footprints of buildings and the impact of the CO2 emissions in terms of concrete. So that's probably, over the last 2 years, the biggest sustainable initiative that I've seen that is actually having an impact on the facilities we're going to build.
Excellent. Stephen, where are sustainable alternatives gaining traction, do you think, if they are?
I think, some of the developments in the industry are inherently already lowering kind of energy and, water usage in certain ways, and that it opens up more options, right? So if you see with the kind of latest AI generation of like NVIDIA chips and requiring liquid cooling, that's brought direct-to-chip onto the latest data center infrastructure. And what that actually does, like, two different kind of metrics, right? One is you're now cooling everything with a much better thermal transfer medium using like water glycol. You lower than the heat transfer, efficient, make it more efficient versus air. So that's already bringing down the amount of cooling you need to do, so bringing down your power usage. And now you have a closed loop liquid system. So that improves the water usage as well, because rather than having to rely on adiabatic cooling, you can now use the water loop to open up the cooling bandwidth you might have and leverage more free cooling. So these are just things that happen as a course of this development, right? Probably what we need to get better at is things like, okay, so we might have more use cases to reuse heat and so on. Are we paying enough attention on this and spending time to design these systems in the community for more people to benefit?
Absolutely. We see this being used to like heat swimming pools and sort of those community projects and bringing that community in that we were talking about. But as with everything else, net zero targets are changing. We're all adapting. They were very sort of set in stone, and then now they're kind of shifting and gaining. So I think there is a place for this, but I think at the end of the day, if you give customers options, isn't it price that always sort of sets the how sustainable do I want to be? But as you said, Michael, I think it takes time. So
I also think it's a common misnomer. I don't think being sustainable costs that much more. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at the total cost of ownership of something, it actually saves money because you're looking at what you do on your operational efficiency. And people don't put that in the upfront CapEx, and so they're not thinking along those lines, and they just see the initial I mean, there are so many opportunities out there to help the community using some of these new technologies and things that are out there to help reduce the carbon offset. Or help carbon offset. So it is exciting times. And I think, honestly, because the demand is where it is, we're going to be pushed to be more on the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
More on the cutting edge rather than the bleeding edge, right? Like we're going to be pushed to be needing to do something different.
Agreed. And I think we need people like you saying, look beyond the sticker shock of the first initial wave. So we've talked about lots of things. And as I said, we lost a few minutes at the beginning. So I'm going to ask you guys just a really quick final question before we go to Q&A. So if you could change one thing about how this industry plans, sources, or delivers digital infra over the next 5 years, what would it be? I'm going to start with you, Michael, and work my way down. Always put you on the spot.
You do. You're picking on me. You're going to hurt my feelings.
No, you're just furthest away from me. That's all.
I think one thing I would change is what Karen said, where we're at today, and the team said, collaboration. I think if we'd have started collaboration 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, whatever the time frame you want to use, I think we'd be in a very different place than we are today, right? We're all in a mad rush. We're all in a panic. Everybody's got timelines that are unreasonable. Everybody's out of control. And it's like you're trying to bring sanity into a madness, right? And I think we could have done ourselves a lot of favors. Like when she's right, when you look at technologies like BESS, it's very expensive, sticker shock. But people forget the back end piece that Karen talked about. Yeah. What about cost of ownership? What about this? You're not doing this. You're not running generator. You're not running diesel. People forget all that. So I think the collaboration is one of the key things that shifted that we should have done years ago.
And we can do that moving forward. So hopefully that's where we go. Karen?
is hard. I think as an industry, I'd like to see us be more heart-led rather than led by our minds. So thinking more of love, and I know it sounds corny, but I think it's really important to be thinking about human-to-human connection and really getting to know the people that you're working with and bringing that human back, because in the AI world that we're going to be moving into, we cannot forget to keep the humans in the center of what we're doing and everything we're thinking about.
I love that. Bring the humans back. Jude.
Yeah, we could probably talk about this for a long time. There's a lot of things you want to change, but
There's always drinks somewhere later.
probably to me is people. I think
Yeah.
Michael alluded to it at the start of the conversation. Like, we talk about gigawatt projects, we talk about billions of capex, but without skilled resource that's there to commission, to test.
Yeah.
Like, you can modularize to an extent. AI is going to have benefits, but that resource on the ground. And I think as an organization and an industry, we need to do a better job promoting that and getting more younger people in and increasing that skill set in the industry. That would be the big takeaway or focus for me.
Absolutely. Stephen.
I think to build on some of what I already said, I think being better communicators is something we should do more on many different aspects, right? So we touched a lot about how, suppliers and customers should communicate, but also how, as an industry, we should communicate to the public, both in terms of, what kind of opportunities are present in terms of getting people to be more interested in, working in the industry, but also in terms of what we offer to, the economy, to the world, and how that should, meld with our community relations in these various projects that we're all doing.
Excellent. Okay, well, we have lots of great insight there. Collaboration, go back to human, people, resources, next gen, all of those things, and communicate more. So we've got questions coming up already. So let's take the first one. How far are we from truly reliable predictive maintenance in data centers? Michael?
We're actually there. I mean, and I mean that from a standpoint, if you look at what Honeywell's done for years, right? It's building, we've been in buildings forever, controls, software. So we can do predictive maintenance on certain things in a data center. And I want to be careful what I say, because there's predictive maintenance on electrical, there's predictive maintenance on this. And what's the expectation of someone like you guys that own a data center? So can you do it? Yes. Where it begins to break down is we all leverage the cloud to do that. Now, how many data center customers do you think want to send their data outside their four walls, even though they're building the cloud for you? Very few. So I think it's going to take, as we build gateways and boxes, which we're working on to put inside the four walls, then I think you'll see predictive maintenance begin to take off.
Anybody else? Stephen?
I think maybe I want to challenge that a little bit, because I think there's a big difference between having predictive maintenance in certain components versus in the data center as a whole, right? And one of these major challenges is probably everything being very new. So a lot of the technology is shifting, and to be honest, what we find, something that we're doing a lot is these kind of break fix analysis, right? Something breaks, nobody knows what's happening. And then, it gets sent to a laboratory, and we get microscopes, and we're looking at all the components, and we, do this whole investigation, 2 to 3 weeks, figure out what happened. And that kind of stuff is happening all the time. So we're not even at the point where we know what's going wrong all the time. And to get there, to get to predictive maintenance, we need to at least understand that landscape. So there's a lot of different layers of building upon the knowledge. Yeah.
You got to stop buying stuff that breaks. Well, I'll be happy to meet with you.
I was going to say, it's kind of like fixing the plane when you're flying it, right?
And that's why I said you got to be careful what you talk about.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a very broad question, right? Truly reliable predictive maintenance. Because as you said, there's so many components. Like you said, there's new technology coming all the time, which we're all still learning. Anyone else, or shall I move on? Nope? Okay. Okay, the S words come up again. Can you drive standardization of components rather than the design itself? Your suppliers should benefit from this also, and it should reduce delivery challenges. So I think there's a question and a statement there. So anybody want to take that one?
Yeah.
Since you brought it up.
Yeah, I think the best placed. I think 100%. When I reference standardization of design, there is elements of that design that you're looking to be standard in line, but a lot of it does come down to components. And what we're seeing, one of the biggest challenges is that when you're in a position that you're limited to a specific manufacturer, so it is a really, really valid point that we should have equal or approved, or you should have optionality. And I think it further adds, we've seen over the past couple of months with the geopolitical issues and the impact that's had on supply chain. And we had one or two instances whereby you're slightly restricted to where parts are coming from. So would 100% agree that we should be standardizing components, but we should also have optionality and flexibility from A, who can provide them, and B, where they're being sourced. And I think that's really important at this point in time.
I agree completely. I mean, what we're trying to do is get a design that works no matter who our tenant stack is, and then have our components that we know can flex, and we know when they can flex and at what point. So that way, if the tenant comes in, let's say we're at a certain point of capacity purchasing, and we can know we can't adjust X, Y, and Z, but we can't adjust A, B, and C, then we just are able to communicate through transparency that, unfortunately, I know your design typically calls for this, but if you want it at this date or you want it at this time, you have to accept, this portion only. However, I do have this I can modify to meet what your requirements are. So it's understanding the inputs ahead of time, trying to have as agnostic of a design as possible at the start, and then figuring out, what those triggers are, and then, of course, mapping it over the timeline of your project. And then if you have, and that's the optionality and the flexibility that's built into the design itself, and then those component parts can be standardized, and that's the whole goal, right? So it's just like how you build the box a little bigger to have the largest UPS, right? Whatever it is that's inside your e-house. And then that way, if you have to shift and adjust, you know that you don't have to adjust the size, so your building shape doesn't need to shift, but certain parts inside the box do.
Agreed. Anyone else? Any thoughts on standardization?
Yeah, and I think your larger players do this today, right? They have multiple vendors for everything. As Karen said, they can flex when they need to. The designs could vary differently, but you're seeing them lock into the designs and kind of riding this one out. Then comes number 2 and 3 and 4. They're getting there. Yeah. It's happening.
So, I mean, that's sometimes why I think, as the purchaser, you kind of sometimes stick with one vendor because their stuff, and you're kind of trying to standardize that. But we are, as you said, we need optionality. Okay, last one's come in. Are there plans to use AI to enhance the existing supply chain for better performance while improving collaboration? We had managed to just stay away from AI for one panel, but here it comes. Anybody want to take that?
I think you can see this already happening in many different levels, right? So on one hand, when we were talking about kind of next generation product development for the data centers that are going to be built in the next couple of years, that's going to have new equipment that we don't quite have physically yet. So to do that, there's a lot of simulation that's happening, and the tools that we're using, a lot of them are now starting to have AI built into them for better modeling purposes, and then you can then do better thermodynamic modeling and CFD analysis. A lot of this is AI driven. And similarly, even on like ERP systems, right? So you have a lot of the main software providers, they are leveraging AI as well. It's costing a lot of money, but it's coming. So I see this as a trend, and I guess the question is how fast can we implement it?
There is supply chain software that uses AI that allows for collaboration and on the job learning, I guess. So you're able to input everything to an AI bot, and they come out and they help and they work with you. They ask you questions, and you're able to figure things out. I mean, that tool does exist already today. It's just I don't think everybody knows about it yet, but we're going to see more of that in all the different spaces. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to see who the early adopters are, who's going to be, because the early adopters are the ones that are going to be successful, right? Because then they're taking the collaboration to the nth degree, and they're really thinking through everything up and down the supply chain stack. And I mean, that's people too. So it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, probably to build on what Karen said, there is a lot of good tools and platforms out there for supply chain and supply chain management. At Apto, what we are finding, the use of AI, and it has been really beneficial in identification of supply chain that are outside of the data center industry. So the new regions you go into, we're conducting an awful lot of pre-qualifications, and it's a method that we're using to mitigate the supply chain constraints. So identify substation developers, general contractors, equipment vendors, consultants that may be working in other industries, pharma, industrial, logistics, and evaluating their capability and generating that identification early, but partnering with them over the years ahead that you're building supply chain. And we have found AI is excellent in this initial screening. So it's probably just to build on what Karen said. There is tools there, but we found it very, very useful and beneficial in early stage engagement.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I'm sorry. Apparently really want to talk today. What I would love to see happen, and this is with equipment for now, but every single supplier works in one database. And then it's like you go in and you type in, I need this, this, and this, and like the ones that actually have supply and the time frame you need it showed up with their price points, and then you just select, right? And that way, everybody who's got something is going to be used, and the people that have too much, or the people that don't have enough can share. So I would see like the industries itself shifting and helping each other, so competitors go away because there's so much demand that everyone's going to get fed, right? So it just seems to make sense to me.
Michael.
It's already going to happen. I was with a large customer. They invited me to speak. They wanted to hear a different side, right? What's it like to work, et cetera. Their AI person's had an interesting fact. There's already more AI agents than humans on the planet. Think about that.
Wow.
There are already more AI agents available to us than there are us on the planet.
How do you fact check that?
I don't know.
You ask AI.
That's the stat they give.
So
But you're seeing them all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's happening.
interesting.
I think
Thank you, data centers.
Yes, thank you. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. We've just gone slightly over. But I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and sharing your insights. Again, I think, what we said at the beginning, the 3 Ps are really important. And success doesn't just depend on technology and investment, but on collaboration and people. So thank you all. Thanks for joining us. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.